Welcome into the best damn college football show out there with Robbie Veno, Ralph Michaels. I am Drew Martin. Huge shout out to the chat box, guys. And we got 3 games we're breaking down on today's slate, a Friday night, 2 Saturdays with a little bit of a degenerate feel at the end. Also, what we learned and best bets at the end. So, Robbie Veno at Rob Veno Sports. Welcome in, buddy. How you feeling?
I feel great, Drew. Happy to be here with you guys on Tuesday, as always. I don't know if this is a new time slot for us or not, but this really works for me. Tuesday, 2 p.m. I like this. And we had a lot of college football this weekend. We certainly are getting into what I would consider to be the thick of things, even though, the games we'll talk about today, guys. It's like what we talked about to begin the season 6-7 weeks ago, because really we only have one game of data for everybody that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, for sure, Rob. And we did. We got pushed back an hour, but heck, if you like it, if the chat box likes it, maybe we'll keep it. We'll see what Ralph thinks. Follow him on Twitter at CalSportsLV. Welcome in, buddy.
Drew, the only thing that matters to me is that Rob's happy. Screw it. I've got to be flexible. As long as we have Rob on the show, then that's all that matters. So
I'm going to play this back for my wife because she needs to see that and hear that.
That's right.
I was thinking, Rob, you don't look like the type of guy that's too hard to keep happy.
I'm a simple man, Drew. I'm a simple man, believe me.
Simple's a good thing, though, Robbie. And to keep it simple here, is there anything kind of on the simple side that sports bettors can learn from last week? Is there anything you learned last week or really up to this point in the college football season that you think sports bettors need to know about to, going forward to try to find more wins than losses here, Robbie?
Well, let's start with basic handicapping 101, especially when it comes to football. You're never as bad as you look in your first game. You're never as good as you look in your first game. And the biggest improvements are always made between game 1 and game 2. So don't let your eyes deceive you what you saw. Now, again, I don't want to make blanket statements and say everything's going to reverse. A team that was terrible is going to be good this week. But you have to be careful between weeks 1 and week 2. We'll go through 3 games, dissect them for the viewers, and we'll kind of point out what we see. But I would say that's just basic fundamental handicapping, Drew, especially in football. You just can't take everything you saw week 1 for granted, that it's written in stone. There'll be some changes this week. There were some things that I saw that I was surprised by last week. I think if you're a fan, Johnny Detroit of the University of Michigan, you're very happy. Joe Milton was really somewhat of an unknown commodity coming in, and Michigan looked great. And I'll say it right now. I was 6-0 on this show with best bets until that Michigan-Minnesota under, which was taken care of, I think, by halftime. Michigan scored early and often. Minnesota scored early and often. But I think Michigan was a pleasant surprise. And as we get out to the Mountain West, there were a couple things there as well. Wyoming, I think, guys, was really hurt by those defensive line opt-outs. We saw a little change in Nevada. Offensively, they're back into the air raid. But I'll leave it there because we're going to talk about a lot of this as we go through games.
Yeah, and Ralph, getting you in here, man. And by the way, guys, follow Ralph on Twitter at CalSportsLV. Always putting out great stuff, good trends and angles. And also Robbie Veno, shout out to him. #1 on WagerTalk in sports memo, meaning just pure profit-wise. The #1 handicapper on the site is Robbie Veno, so check him out. And guys, we do have a $199 special, $199 for the month of November. You get all football for $199, and if you buy it today, you get the rest of October as well. So check that out, WagerTalk.com. Robbie Veno being #1. Ralph Michaels, bringing you in here, buddy. Is there anything you wanted to throw out there to sports bettors in terms of what you've learned so far that they can use going forward?
Yeah, I think Rob made a great point. And Rob, I'm going to just ask you this quick question as well. My power ratings that I make when I get into a season, I change them anywhere from 1 to 5. So obviously there has to be something drastic for a 5. Week 1, no matter how bad you looked or how good you looked, I only make a 2-point adjustment. Do you sort of temper it that same way, Rob? just to give people some idea on power ratings, because we talk about them a lot on this show. Are you in that same scale, or are you not afraid to change them a little bit more, Rob, game one?
Yeah, I don't, Ralph. It's for me, the ceiling has always been 3 points about 98% of the time. And as you said, it's got to be something really drastic for me to go as high as 4. But like I've said on this show before, when I first came to Las Vegas in 1991, I learned a hard lesson about over adjustments based on what I saw with my eyes. And you just can't do that. So ever since mid-90s, I've kept mine to a ceiling of 3, good or bad, anywhere from 1 to 3 as far as an adjustment per week.
Just a quick update, year to date, guys. Home teams against the spread, now 48.1%, still under 500. Home favorites, 45% year to date. So away dogs covering 55%. Home dogs are covering 55%. So keep that in mind. Those home dogs are doing well, and those away dogs in general, are doing great. And there's one number I want to pull up. And if you guys follow me on Twitter, I put a lot of stuff out. Just because I tweet something doesn't mean I want you to bet it or I think it's a good play. I'm giving you interesting information that has a statistical background that can be proven that these are the numbers. This is one that baffles me. This year, in this COVID season, teams playing their first game against teams playing game 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you have a game under your belt advantage. Those teams playing their first game, like Colorado State against Fresno this week, and like New Mexico against San Jose, have gone 25-10 against the spread, 71.5%. For years, I've always said, the team that has a game under their belt has an edge. But, perhaps that team that is rested and has had weeks to prep for this team and is looking forward to it and is hungry to play, and this other team is playing games. But again, this is just a unique COVID season. I'll never take that moving forward, but keep that in mind this year if you're thinking, I'm going to fade Colorado State and New Mexico just because they haven't played any games.
Yeah, and Ralph, I think a big part of that is the team that hasn't played has the film on the team that already has played. So that being a big reason why. And also that New Mexico, isn't there a change of locations there?
I don't know that if there is, I haven't gotten. I'm unaware of that if there is.
Okay, I might be off on that one, but did want to bring that up that it's a possibility that I believe that I read that. But guys, we got to get into the Friday night action here. We got a huge Friday night card with 4 games, 3 Division I versus Division I. We also got Thursday night matchups as well, but we're breaking down the Hawaii versus Wyoming game in full here, guys, on Fox Sports 1, 9:45 Eastern kick here. -1.5. That's the Rainbow Warriors laying on the road in Laramie, 60 being the total here, Ralph. You have any interest in betting the Friday nighter in the Mountain West?
Yeah, just as you said that, Drew, I'm looking at the story from 21 hours ago. That New Mexico area where Albuquerque is so COVID. It has so many COVID cases. They did move it to the Bay Area. So nice catch on that. I hadn't done this morning's reading yet on that. So, I look at Hawaii, and I know this. This is the third time in the last 6 years or 7 years they're playing back-to-back trips. Well, that means they're staying on the mainland. And while they've lost the second of those games, 2 out of those 3, they've played much better than they have the first. Now, this is the first time they won the first game with this new rush attack they have. Again, with the new head coach they have, we were worried about the systems they were bringing in. Can you replace a coach like that? And then you bring in Todd Graham with what he did at Tulsa, that rush attack. So what does Hawaii do? They go out and they rush for 300 some yards. They did have a huge turnover edge, and that changes the whole dynamic of the game. But, I want to point out that, the sophomore quarterback, Cordero is now 5-0 as a starter. And there's something to be said about that. You come in, you win your 4 games as a freshman that you play. You're a dog the first game. You come to the mainland, you win that game. That's a lot of confidence for a very young quarterback. And it's something I look at when I get Hawaii. Now, even with Wyoming's opt-outs, I will say this. Wyoming's defense is still better than Fresno State's defense. And, rushing for 323 yards and being plus all those turnovers makes it where you could do everything. I think they struggle. And let's not forget, we talk about altitude in Denver. Wyoming is the highest altitude stadium in the country. It's the second highest besides New Mexico State in North America. It's 7,200 feet. So we hear all this, altitude in Denver, Rocky Mountain High. I mean, that's 5,000 feet. This is an extra 2,000 feet. I think we're going to see Hawaii tire out playing a second game in 5 days in the cold, in the altitude. That's not a spot I want to back them. I have Wyoming as a 2-point favorite in this game in my power ratings. So with Hawaii, I believe it opened Wyoming pick. I think now Hawaii is a 1.5 or 2-point favorite. I actually lean for the Cowboys in this one in a close, lower scoring game.
Yeah, short home dog here, Ralph. You bring up the actual temperature. You're right. I mean, we're in the middle of a cold front, even here in Las Vegas. It's in the 40s right now. Robbie, how much are you factoring that in? And the altitude, like Ralph said, the highest elevation for any Division I FBS football stadium here is Wyoming. Laramie being over 7,000 feet high, like Ralph said. What are you thinking here? Hawaii versus Wyoming, Robbie?
Yeah, both important factors certainly inside this handicap, Drew. I wanted and did not get a better number on the total for the opener because I was going to play over instantly. Now, I had over in the Wyoming-Nevada game last Saturday. That price was 52.5 when I got it. By the time kick went, I think it was up around 54, maybe higher. A lot of people got to that total. That total went over rather easily. It didn't need the overtime, but certainly overtime made the final score even higher. Couple of reasons why. The Wyoming defensive front seven was, I won't say fully decimated, but significantly hurt by opt-outs and injuries. They got very little pressure on Nevada quarterback Carson Strong last week. I think Carson Strong threw the ball 52 times for Nevada. Only 3 sacks against him with 0 quarterback hurries, and it was a real concern of the Wyoming coaching staff in an article I read Sunday morning. I don't know if that's going to improve much, Drew. And against Hawaii, which is a team that, as Ralph mentioned, now under Todd Graham, they run a run-oriented spread, somewhat like what Gus Malzahn has at Auburn, run-oriented. He wants to run the football, but it does have air raid principles mixed in for the passing game. They do have G.J. Kinney as the offensive coordinator, who, remember, was an air raid quarterback at Tulsa, I think under Todd Graham. I think that's why he got the job, because he has a connection to Todd Graham from Tulsa. But I think that that Hawaii matches up real well here, offense versus defense, fundamentally. I just don't know that Wyoming can apply the pressure. We'll see if that works out. Now, they did run the ball 53 times the first game because it worked, but I think Hawaii is going to be one of those teams where they're going to push their play calling toward whatever the defensive weakness is game by game. So we'll see if they don't throw it a little bit more here. And Chevin Cordero, who went to the same high school, St. Louis High School, as Marcus Mariota, and ran the run and shoot there for that team, really took to this offense right out of the chute. If you look at his numbers in that game, guys, not only passing-wise, but he ran the football real well. I mean, it was a combination running attack. Miles Reed, the returning running back, and Cordero, both over 100 yards in that game. So, to me, Hawaii looks like they're going to be okay in a brand new offensive system because the pieces fit. Defensively might be another story. Let's get to Wyoming real quick. They lose their quarterback on the 3rd play of the game. Sean Chambers goes down. Dual threat quarterback. Really high hopes for Wyoming this year. And, all the air came out of the balloon, so to speak, on the 3rd play of the game for Wyoming. They really didn't get it going in the first half. Levi Williams, the backup, has had experience. He comes in the second half, and all of a sudden they move the football real well. 251 total yards in the second half. They make a big comeback. I think Wyoming, in their type of offense, that power run style game, has an advantage over Hawaii. Therefore, I was going to get to over, but 60 points now has me really rethinking. The opening number I didn't even like. Now it's gone even higher. We'll see where to go from there. Like Ralph, I made Wyoming the favorite in this game, power ratings wise, -1.5 for Wyoming. And I would say this, as short of a season as it is, so condensed, 8 games in the Mountain West, for Wyoming to already have one loss and have expectations coming in of winning this, not only division, but possibly conference, they're in a desperate situation already where Hawaii's got to win under their belt. So I think the more desperate team is Wyoming. I think the fundamental matchups work good for points. I'm just not sure that they can get up and over 60.
Yeah, guys, wanted to throw out a couple points here on where I think the line might go, because it's kind of a tricky handicap with a lot going on here. One, the weather in Wyoming, Laramie, Wyoming. I'm seeing a low of 30 on Friday night with 13 to 15 mile an hour winds. I'm not so sure that really helps the Hawaii offense. Plus the fact, it is a short week, which would make me normally look at the home team. But with Hawaii's kind of unique travel situation here, staying on the mainland, I'm not so sure that going from Fresno to Denver and then Wyoming, because Wyoming was also an away team in week 1, that it doesn't actually help Hawaii in a little bit. It's kind of a unique fashion in being the away team in a short week here, being the away team. So I don't know. It's kind of contrasting styles there. Ralph, is there anything else you wanted to throw out here on the Wyoming game before we move down the board?
Again, I think it's a big deal when a team gets to bond. Even in the NFL, we've seen San Francisco do it multiple times. When they were going east, they stayed at the Greenbrier. This week, they stayed at Youngstown. Those teams in the second of back-to-back aways, when they're staying together, you get a lot of bonding. There's nothing else they're focused on except football for that entire week. It's almost, to me, it's a positive. It's not a negative, playing a second straight road game in that situation.
Yeah, it's that going on. And plus the fact I wanted to throw up kind of on the opposite end here. I'm really at odds on who to bet on Friday night. Feel like I got to bet it last game on the card here, Ralph. But also want to give a shout out to Craig Bohl, the Wyoming head coach. In my opinion, one of the more underrated head coaches in college football, coming from the North Dakota State program and then coming over to Wyoming and making them a bowl team in multiple years here. So shout out to him as well, being a really well-coached team there with Wyoming. Guys, we got a Saturday card here. And again, shout out to the chat box. Really appreciate everybody joining us. Anthony Thomas, Joshua Moon, all you guys out there, 9 Root Football. Feel free to throw out anything you're looking to bet and why. We got best bets at the end here. But next game up on Saturday, ABC, 7:30 Eastern kick. Battle of ranked teams here. Ohio State at Penn State. Looks like Ohio State -12 on the road. 63.5 being the total in Happy Valley, Robbie. Any interest in betting the top 20 matchup in the Big Ten?
Well, I think here's a perfect example. And of course, the last game we talked about was really a good example too, Drew, of differences maybe occurring between the week 1 result and the week 2 result. I mean, maybe Wyoming got a lot of things defensively ironed out. Maybe they didn't. We're going to find out, though. I wouldn't take Wyoming's poor defensive effort and say they're going to be poor all year long. As you pointed out, Craig Bohl, a very good coach. They are under the guidance of a new DC there as well, but it's the same defensive concept. Here, a lot was made of Indiana's 36-35 victory over Penn State, but you start combing through the statistics, and this game wasn't close. And I watched a good portion of this game, and I tremendously lucked out, when the Penn State running back crossed the goal line and gave Indiana a chance to come back and tie and force overtime, because that fourth quarter allowed that game to get a chance to go over the total of 62, a number that was dead in the water for 3 quarters, just dead, because of Penn State offensive failures as far as scoring is concerned, not necessarily because of yardage. The yardage numbers in that game heavily favor Penn State. Indiana did next to nothing to deserve 36 points. But however, they took advantage and they scored them. And so you give a lot of credit to Indiana and Tom Allen. I think they'll be way better offensively this week than what they showed numerically last week. For Penn State, it's a different animal now. You're playing Ohio State. I watched them, Drew and Ralph, and I don't know where yours are, Ralph, but let us know once I stop talking here where your power ratings are. I rate Ohio State as the best team in the country, and they've only played one game. I have them over Clemson on a neutral. I have them over Alabama on a neutral. Not by much, guys, but I have Ohio State the best team. They're going to cause Penn State no end of fits in this game with that offensive team that they have. Now, the running game isn't as great as it was last year, and maybe that'll take a little time to get on track. But, boy, the scheme itself is tough. I know that it's been pointed out by Ralph a couple of times, and I think I saw it on Twitter once again, besides being on the show, that the whiteout in Penn State is one of the biggest home advantages that won't really be had here. You won't get the 100,000+. They've had some wild games to speak of, and perhaps the away team can come in here and not have as many problems as they've had in the past with Penn State. I don't like the fact that the number moved up, guys. Like I say, I like Ohio State, and I even power rate them even stronger in this game than what the current line is. But I just think that Penn State's being downgraded for something that really didn't happen last week, and that is a poor performance and a loss. They really performed well on both sides of the football. It came down to not being able to score. It came down to a couple of breakdowns, but those things can all be ironed out. I'm kind of torn which way to go here, but I do think that the number might be a little bit off here. I think Penn State might get closer than 11.5.
Okay, maybe looking towards the dog there. And Ralph, any strong feelings here in the Big Ten game?
Well, going back to your question, Rob, I think Ohio State is the best team in the country, but my power ratings don't have them there yet just because of my adjustments. I started Ohio State at 0. I started them at 0, and because they're the Gold Sheet power rating numbers this year, made Clemson 1, had Alabama 2, and since Clemson has improved, right, and I only moved Ohio State up 1 off the Nebraska win, because if you take off that last touchdown, which he shouldn't have ran anyway because he pissed off the coach, it would have been a push against the spread right where my numbers were. So yes, but with my limited adjustment week 1, my power ratings don't actually say they're the best team, but in my mind they are. You talked about Penn State. I give Penn State, my strongest home edge is 5 in college football. When a Penn State has a whiteout, I give them 7. That shows you how much I love Penn State in a whiteout situation. They're going to lose those. Penn State's had 13 whiteouts. They're 11-2. Guess who those 2 losses are to? If Ohio State's going to be on your schedule, Ohio State is going to be the whiteout game. And those 2 losses in the whiteout games were to Ohio State. Game day is still going to be there, so the kids have to be excited. But, Ohio State got their flat spot out. If you remember last week's show, we talked about, did we do Ohio State, Nebraska on this, or did I do a video where I wanted to fade? I said play against Ohio State in the first half because with no fans, they're going to come out flat. And that's exactly what they did. It was a 14-14 tie with Nebraska before they moved on. I think Penn State, it's actually a negative home field edge. They're so accustomed to a night game being a whiteout and feeding off that frenzy that when they walk off, they're off that disappointing loss playing Ohio State. It's going to be very tough for them to get motivated. On the flip side, I don't think motivation has any issue for Ohio State going into Penn State. One thing I will say is if you watched Ohio State, they had problems with a running quarterback. Well, guess what? Sean Clifford ran the ball 17 times for 119 yards against Indiana. Rob talked about the discrepancy last week in that game. Penn State, 488 yards. Indiana, 211. There was a 277-yard edge. Penn State, 27 first downs. Indiana, 16 first downs. You have a 277-yard edge and an 11 first down edge. And turnovers are only -1. There's not many games you're going to lose. So that is the head beater for them. But Ohio State in the last 3 years, they've played 16 ranked opponents in the Big Ten. They've won all 16. The only other team that have played more than 5 and won them all was Clemson. And while I think the running attack will get better, I think there's going to be some issues early again. I think this game is going to play out exactly like the Nebraska game did. I think Penn State's going to come down being able to score once or twice against this defense, which is still getting their feelings. And, the announcers made a great point last week. It wasn't Gus. It was the color guy who talked about, you have to remember that Ohio State lost their DC. He's now the head coach at Boston College. They kept the exact same defense. Kerry Coombs is back as the DC, co-DC. They kept the exact same defense this year, but look at who they lost in the draft. You got Chase Young, you have Okuda, you have other cornerbacks. So they don't have the same personnel. So early, I think with a mobile quarterback like Clifford and some defensive things they still have to work out. I think Penn State scores a touchdown in the first or second quarter, keeps the game sort of close, and then I think Ohio State pulls away in the second half.
Okay, good stuff, guys. There on the Big Ten game. We got one game left with a little bit of a degenerate feel here, and then we got best bets coming up. But heading to the state of Nevada, the Silver State here, 10:30 Eastern kick on FS1. We got Nevada at UNLV. Interesting note, I believe there will be about 2,000 fans for the first time in Allegiant Stadium. Nevada, minus 14 here in Las Vegas, 59.5 being the total, Ralph. We got UNLV at home. I doubt we'll be there in person, but it will be a fun one to watch. A lot of tickets written anyway. Last game on the board Saturday night, degenerate special here. What do you think of Nevada versus UNLV?
I would love to be there. So if anyone has an extra seat, just reach out at Twitter and I'll be happy to get to the game with you and we'll break down the game. We'll break down the game live. I'm going to say this. I had the displeasure of watching UNLV's game against San Diego State. And it was probably the worst half of football I've ever seen in my life. Ever. Honest to God. I mean, I don't know if you guys watched it, but it was ugly. I mean, we're talking a new quarterback, a new offense, 3 quarterbacks. They couldn't practice because of COVID. He played them all a couple drives. Now, granted, the third quarter was probably the biggest turnaround I've ever seen. We use ever a lot, but from what UNLV did in that first half to how UNLV looked in just the third quarter, they reverted back to the fourth quarter, or maybe San Diego State was just so flat. Remember, San Diego State, what a weird setting. They're driving up to Carson to play where the Chargers played football because they're tearing down the stadium and they're building a new stadium for 2 years. So for 2 years, San Diego State's playing in Carson outside of LA. So that's a unique setting for them as well. Nevada impressed me. You got to remember, 17 returning starters. You have a quarterback in sophomore Strong who had a decent year last year. He looks so much better. He threw 6 picks his first 5 games last year as a freshman. Right now, he's the leader in the country. He has not thrown a pick for 203 attempts. So you have a sophomore quarterback who is now established. You have a strong offensive line. You have 4 offensive line stars back, and you have a 5th guy who started multiple games. All of those guys with starting experience. I see that they're going to run right through UNLV. So, problem is this, my power rating number is only 11. Again, I only adjusted UNLV down 2. Had I watched the first half, I probably would have adjusted them down 6 and changed my rule of making 5 a max. But again, you have to think now. I think Max Gillum is going to be the guy to get the charge. He had that third quarter. That means you now have a week in practice where he actually gets to throw to his receivers, work with his center, and be the number 1 guy without worrying about looking over his shoulder and when he gets pulled. But, I just can't. There's no way I can bet on UNLV after what I saw in that last week. And I am afraid to lay 14 with Nevada, just to be quite honest. You have this new dynamic. No Mountain West player has ever played in a dome, except maybe a bowl game. So does UNLV come in big-eyed? Does the Wolfpack come in big-eyed playing in this Allegiant Stadium where they watched the Raiders play the last few games? That's another dynamic that keeps me away from the game. But, I would lean over first half. I think Nevada gets out quick. I think UNLV might be able to score a few. But as far as the game's concerned, my power rating number, again, is 10 or 11. This is up to 14, so I'm going to pass. And I did look this up, and I thought it interesting, so I will share. Nevada has double revenge. They were, a 14-point home favorite 2 years ago, and they lost 34-29. They were a 7-point road favorite, or they were a home favorite last year, a road favorite 2 years ago of 7 and 14 points. So in college football, when a team has double revenge against the conference foe, losing by a favorite or 7 or more, going back all the way to 1989, those teams have only covered 46.2% of the time. So don't have that notion in your head, oh, Nevada has double revenge. They lost as a big favorite back-to-back games. In college football, playing a conference foe with double revenge from a touchdown plus losses in back-to-back games, again, only 46.2% against the spread.
Love hearing that stat. And Ralph, just a follow up there. Do you think revenge overall as a betting angle is just overrated?
Oh, you know what? I went on a tirade. I went on WagerTalk today and I went nuts. I just want everyone that's watching, I'm going to use the NFL as an example. How many games this week does a team have revenge in the NFL? Every freaking game. Everyone's played everyone, so somebody lost the last game. Everyone's played everyone in conference football. Everyone's lost the last game. So every game has revenge. Not saying there's not meaningful revenge in certain spots, but people that just use, oh, they have revenge is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of, because every game has revenge in every conference football game in college football, and every NFL game there is every week has revenge.
Yeah, I asked the question just because I think that all the time. Whenever I hear somebody say, oh, they have revenge, I'm like, so what? They're the only team that wants to win here? I just think it's very overrated. That's why I asked.
I looked up that number, Drew and Rob, and I actually was surprised it was under 50%. I thought conference revenge, losing as a touchdown favorite in back-to-back games, getting upset, I actually expected it to be over 50%. So that number shocked me. But you know what? We all learn now, and that's exactly why you look up numbers. Reach out to me on Twitter if you have a question. Don't bet something that you're going to have hearsay that you heard at a bar. Oh, this team lost as a touchdown favorite. They have revenge. That's a 60% play. How many hearsay things like that people bet on without knowing the facts? That's like saying, oh, I'm going to bet this stock. Well, what has it done the last year? Oh, I don't know.
Robbie, it's a tough follow here, but I guess
I know.
Your thoughts on revenge and also Nevada UNLV here, buddy.
Well, I'll say this about Nevada. They did the best. They did themselves the biggest favor in the world when they shipped Brian Polian the heck out of that place, because that guy came in and destroyed that offense that had been built by Chris Alt, and really was a dynamic offense for years, and then he comes in and just destroys it. And it's taken Jay Norvell, a couple of years to get it to where he wants it, but you saw last week that he's finally got the pieces in place to run this air raid system. As I mentioned earlier, 52 passes last week by the quarterback, Carson Strong, and the receiving duo last week of Romeo Doubs at wide receiver, who was just tremendous. And then the tight end, Cole Garrett, who was as tremendous. I think those two combined.
Cole Turner,
excuse me, Ralph. I think they combined for well over 250 yards of receiving, and they had a couple of touchdowns to add to it. That was against Wyoming, guys, a team with a defensive pedigree, regardless of the opt-outs and the injuries. Wyoming couldn't do anything. They couldn't play man. They got beat. They couldn't play zone. They got beat. UNLV faced a team last week in San Diego State that's got a brand new coaching staff, a brand new offense, a brand new quarterback in Carson Baker, and a team that didn't even try to throw the ball whatsoever. And they ran the ball 65% of the time. Contrary to that, Nevada threw the ball 65% of the time. So for me, this matchup of UNLV's defense against the Nevada offense just screams points. If San Diego State can go out with all the situations that I just described, new scheme, brand new quarterback. I mean, the kid started the final game last year against BYU, so we'll give him 1 start under his belt. But you get my point here. If they can go out and score 34 points and have drives, scoring drives of 85 yards, 80 yards, 66 yards, 85 yards, that's 3 80-plus yard drives. San Diego State running the football. In my mind, Nevada will slice this team up through the air with no problem whatsoever. UNLV got no pressure on the quarterback when he did try to throw last week. So that puts me at Nevada somewhere around 45 points in this game. Now, the question is, does UNLV's offense stink as bad as the numbers were last week? Obviously, the San Diego State defense is the strength of the team. It's better than Nevada's defense, but 11 first downs, 1 of 15 on third down conversions, 3 quarterbacks in and out. Now, there's experience there. That's the crazy point here, guys, is that when you have Max Gillum, who's got a lot of experience with this team, and when you have Kenyon Oblad, who has experience with this team, I expect a little bit better from them. You can see I'm pushing kind of towards the total here, Drew. You said the current number is 59. And while what I'm about to say, I'm sure somebody would say, well, what the hell, Rob? Why wouldn't you just go play Nevada? But I'm thinking that UNLV can get me to 17 points and push me over this number of 59, because I really think I don't think they're going to let up throwing the football here after watching last week. Now, they played without their number 1 running back, Tua Tawa, last week. They did just fine in the running game. They did what they had to do. It wasn't great, but they did what they had to do. If they do that same thing again here, they're going to get in the mid-40s, guys. I really believe that. And for me, UNLV, lesser defense. Ralph mentioned an extra week of practice, time to iron some things out. We know Marcus Arroyo is a pretty sharp offensive mind. If they can get me to 17, I think you get this over rather easily. So that's probably the way I would lean. Although, as I mentioned, 45-17 would suggest, that's a 28-point win, Rob. Just go play Nevada minus the points. I may do that too. I mean, they looked that good to me last week. I think they're really in contention at this point to, they probably won't beat Boise, but they've done it before. So perhaps they could win this Mountain West.
All right, good stuff, boys, with the degenerate special there, Nevada versus UNLV. New segment we're going to try. We might add, actually, the degenerate special onto the 3 games going forward, but this UNLV-Nevada game was the last game on the card for Saturday's action. So we got best bets coming up. Robbie, you have been on a heck of a run with best bets. I believe 5-1 since the show started. Might be off on that number, though, but you want to lead us off here with best bet?
I will. We were a perfect 6-0 till last week. Stupid me tried to play an under, and I got burned for trying to play an under. So I'll go right back to the well and play a game that we talked about and play the total. And I just rambled on about how I think Nevada and UNLV is going to get over, and I'll use that as my best bet. I really think over 59 is a good spot here. It's obviously a rivalry. So you expect both of these teams to come 100% focused. You expect the playbooks to be well expanded in a rivalry game. I'm going to hope for UNLV to do their part here. I'm positive Nevada will do theirs. I would say this. If you're going to play this total, play it now, because as Drew mentioned, it is the degenerate special, the very last game on the board Saturday night, and most will run to the window in that late game on Saturday with favorite and over. So you don't want to get up to 61, 62 and be playing it then. 59, I think, is a pretty safe number. So I'm going to use that this week for the best bet.
And Robbie, just for record-keeping purposes here, it did open 57, but it's pretty much 59.5 across the board. So you good with that?
I'm very good with that, Drew. I think you probably get the 62 here.
Okay, so 59.5 over in the UNLV Nevada game for Robbie Veno. Ralph Michaels on Twitter at CalSportsLV. What do you got for best bets, buddy?
I'm going to just add one more statement to Rob's talking about this game at night. When it's the only game on in the sports book, plus you have a lot of people here in the city going to be interested in watching it because it's at Allegiant Stadium. Just a note. The Raiders do play on grass. It's a tray of grass that they have out that they pool in. UNLV will play on artificial turf underneath. They don't play on the same grass as the Raiders, so you do have a faster track. they do have an artificial turf if you're watching that game. And if you had watched the Raiders play on grass. So, when it's the only game on and it's going to be on CBS and you've got, the Pac-12 guys doing the game, Pavlos is doing the game. So he gives me a headache watching the game with him on color. So
really,
Drew, I used it last week. I saw you on Twitter saying this is the best offense in the country, even missing one of their star wide receivers and key return man. I'm going Bama first half. I'm going to lay the 18. I used Bama first half last week against Tennessee. And they even covered that with Tennessee scoring a touchdown. Tennessee's got a much better offense. I think Nick Saban makes a statement to Mike Leach. He's not. I think Saban's like sitting there going, I am so tired of watching this guy's press conferences, and they don't make sense. And I just think he has this. He just wants to shut down his offense totally week number one. I think he's going to let his offense jump out. Yes, it's a big loss in the wide receiver and, the dynamics of scoring those long touchdowns, both kick return and punt return will hurt them, against other teams in the playoffs perhaps. But in this case, I'll lay the 18 with Bama in the first half.
Okay, I like that, Ralph. And yeah, I mean, Alabama, everybody is kind of, at least in my opinion, scared to lay the big numbers with Alabama because of Nick Saban's past track record with covering big numbers has not been good. But this year, since Stark took over at the OC there, if you watch them play, first of all, Mac Jones, I believe, is underrated. I think he's, could possibly be a first round draft pick as the quarterback position. It's always tough to be, go after a guy like Tua. But they're throwing the ball down the field, Ralph, later in the games than they used to under the previous OCs with Nick Saban. So that's one reason I kind of like Alabama just laying the points overall.
Yeah, I mean, they're a different team. I mean, they were a defensive team that just didn't want to make mistakes on offense. The defense managed the game. Now he knows the offense has to manage the game. Hell, I mean, you look at what they allowed against, 700 yards, you have to score. And Saban's one that sees enough of these backdoor covers that he is not afraid to pile up those points early. He may not in the fourth quarter, but I'll tell you what, in that first half, he's not taking I completely agree. Him and Sark are not taking their foot off the gas in the first half.
Okay, so what, you got Bama first half?
First half minus 18.
First half minus 18. So we got Robbie Veno over 59.5 in the degenerate special. UNLV Nevada. We got Ralph Alabama first half minus 18, laying it there with the Crimson Tide. And I am going with UCF versus Houston.
Yes.
Oh, Robbie.
Over
okay.
79?
No, I was going to.
I had it in my head. I said, you know what? Drew's going to play one of these Florida teams. I just knew it. Go ahead, buddy.
Oh, well, I mean, UCF, if you've been betting UCF, the last 3 years, one of the more profitable teams in college football. So going to ride it here. Trend is your friend in college football betting. I like UCF. I think they're underrated here. -2 in the hook. We get them under 3 against Houston. Good weather in Houston. Looks like 71 degrees with very light winds on Saturday. So I'm on the UCF Knights -2.5 against the Houston Cougars.
All right. I made the joke about over 79.
It's 82 now, I think.
Yeah, it's 82.
Is it 82? Okay.
I mean, it depends where you're shopping. It's as high as 83 at Bookmaker.
All right. Listen to this number. In college football, just blindly playing totals over 80, you are 59.5% to the over.
How about that?
It's high for a reason.
So again, don't be afraid, because here's the deal. Vegas has a cap. Okay, Vegas has a cap, 78, 79. Even if this total should be 86, they're going to start at 79 and let people bet them up in increments. They're not going to put a total very high or very, very low, because that exposes themselves. So there is a lot of times when you have a crazy high total that it actually should be much higher. There's times you have a crazy low total and it actually should be much lower. And I mean, that 59.5% to the over example, I mean, is the perfect reasoning behind it, that, those totals probably should be a few points higher, but Vegas isn't going to expose themselves if they don't have to. They put it lower. They let people bet them up to where it needs to be.
Heck, Ralph, I bet them both at the open. I just chose UCF here at the last second. I put the same amount personally on them. I'm going to go 81.5. Let it ride. Load up this rocket ship. I'm going on the over. I'm changing things on the fly. UCF Houston over 81.5 seems to be the prevailing number. There's 82s out there. There's 81s. There was an 83. I think it's all 82.5 or 81.5. So I'm going to go 81.5 over Houston versus UCF, 2:00 Eastern kick in the AAC. Ralph, anything else you want to throw out there before we shut this down?
Only 18 totals over 82 in the college football database going back to 1989. So we are now starting to reach numbers. Let's see. The highest I have in my database was an 89, and that was Cal Oregon in 2016. That game was 52-49, but it was 2 overtimes. So it probably would have been right about the 89 number, depending on touchdowns or field goals. So highest number in the database, 89. UCF might get there if they keep playing the way they are.
I mean, look at these scores. It's 51-49, 51-49. Even Houston, 49.
90 plays. I mean, it is absurd the pace they're playing at.
Yeah, and Houston isn't going to slow it down either. So, and guys in the chat box saying 82 is mostly okay. I can go with that 82 for the best bet. Don't want to shave off a half a point there if it's not widely available. So we got Veno on the over 59.5 UNLV Nevada. Ralph Michaels Alabama first half -18. I am on the over in the UCF Houston game of 82. Robbie Veno, anything else you want to throw out before we shut this down?
Yeah, I'm just looking through my notes here as a predominantly totals player. I'm looking for all those key numbers in the 80s, Drew. I don't see any. So 81.5, 82, I think you're fine. I don't think there's any such thing as a key number when it gets to the 80s. Where UCF is concerned, I had them a couple weeks ago over the total in that Memphis game, and I think I mentioned it here on the show. That team, Central Florida, can make mistakes during the game, blow drives, turn it over after a long drive, and still wind up getting over numbers that are mid-high 70s. So certainly teamed up with Houston, 82-41 aside, is nowhere near unthinkable for those two teams. Glad everybody tuned in today. Obviously, we hope we gave you a little bit of information that helps out here across the board as far as this weekend is concerned. Just be a little bit careful. Big Ten Mountain West, week 1 to week 2. There are some teams that will perform a little bit differently. And with the shortened schedule, like I said, these teams that lost right away and have expectations, they're immediately cornered, backed into a corner. And I would say you're almost in must win. If Penn State gets 2 losses this week, they can kiss that East Division goodbye and a chance in the Big Ten championship game.
Oh, done deal. No question. Yeah.
Done deal.
Great way to end it, boys. And shout out to the chat box again. Robert, 9 Root Football, Anthony Thomas, Johnny Outlaw. Always love having you in here. Mohammed Jamba, welcome in as well. For Ralph Michaels, Robbie Veno, I am Drew Martin. Guys, hopefully you like the show here.
Drew, and you know how we got to end it.
Oh, of course.
He's got one.
I'm going down the track here, Ralph. I'll leave the opening here. If you're watching on replay, feel free to drop a line in the comments. We love reading them. Also, watching live, like hearing it in the chat box as well. Follow Ralph on Twitter at CalSportsLV. Robbie Veno on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports. I'm on Twitter at Drew Martin Bets. Guys, also remember it's $2 Tuesday at Sports Memo and WagerTalk.com. Top play from the top handicapper at both sites, discounted to just $2, and the $199 special for November, college football and the NFL. You get the whole month of November for $199. Plus, if you buy it today, you get the rest of October as well. Robbie Veno, #1 handicapper at both websites. Ralph, you want to end it?
Let's do it, guys. Until next week. Pens up.
Best of luck with your bets, boys. See you next week.